Kamala's victims, that's the focus of tonight's angle. Now, Vice President Harris will try to argue tomorrow night that she deserves your vote because she's the future and Donald Trump is the end of democracy and an agent of chaos. Well, the implication must be that all's calm in America with her in the co-pilot seat, and her home state should be a bright beacon of joy and safety.
Last year in 2023, we had 554 deaths in Riverside County, fentanyl related. As I said, as recently as 2016, we had 2. This is a tidal wave of death and destruction that's coming across our open southern border. We have to get a handle on this fast. It's wrecking our communities.
But Kamala's cabal does not care. They knew that the open border would bring in a certain percentage of thugs and criminals, and they wrote it off. It's all just collateral damage after all. For the most part, the elites aren't affected by open borders, but regular Americans are, in small towns like Springfield, Ohio.
I see what's going on in these streets. These Haitians are running into trash cans. They're running into buildings. They're flipping cars in the middle of the street.
I don't understand what you expect of us as citizens. I mean, I understand they're here under temporary protected status and you're protecting them. And I understand that our city services are overwhelmed and understaffed. But who's protecting us? If we're protecting them, who's protecting me?
Kamala's answer? Well, sorry, you're on your own. Her marching orders from January 2021 onward were to import as many people into the country as possible, and by any means necessary.
Starting with our administration, we gave TPS, temporary protected status, to Haitian migrants, 55,000. And then more recently, we extended temporary protected status to over 100,000 Haitian migrants for that very reason, that they need support, they need protection.
Oh, they need support and protection. That means Americans, though. They're out of luck, including American women. Unless you want an abortion, maybe, or a sex change operation, you'll get no protection. But if you're a migrant, you'll get all the benefits. Oh, speaking of sex change operations, she actually did support the so-called gender-affirming care. And look, for migrants, yeah, and call it equity. A newly surfaced ACLU questionnaire shows that Harris supported the idea of offering sex change surgeries to illegal immigrants or migrants held in federal custody. Harris checked yes in response to a question of whether she would offer government-funded care for transgender and non-binary people, including those in prison and in immigration detention. Oh, why not? But if anyone speaks out against this or anything else, Kamala's camp will probably brand them intolerant or just plain racist.
When folks stand up here and describe what is happening to them, they are often painted with a broad brush of racism. That has nothing to do with it. Color has nothing to do with what we're facing. It's culture.
Kamala doesn't care. Of course, she's right. Now, to use her phrase, let's be clear. This is the Biden-Harris policy. They know that these migrants are going to cause problems and in some cases commit heinous crimes. And by the way, Kamala Harris knows that a disproportionate share of the victims of this heinous open border will be women. And she does not care. So if you think it's bad out there when it's 2 months before an election, imagine what our country, our homeland, will look like with 4 more years of this. I mean, the establishment, they fought Trump for 9 years. They tried to put him in jail, his supporters in jail. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars to destroy him. But the one thing that the establishment will never do is compromise on this issue of the border. Over the last 2 decades, the establishment has tried time and again to put forward some phony bipartisan deal that would supposedly address Americans' concerns, but every time we, and I underline we, have actually read these bills, they're so full of holes and they give such broad discretion to the White House and their officials that it would always lead back to a policy of open borders. And so what happens to these bills? They end up collapsing, as they should. But of course, Democrats have their political cover, and the Republicans, stupid enough to co-sponsor these bills, have given Democrats the political cover. But tonight I'm telling you, that cover is wearing thin as the list of victims, mostly young women, continues to grow. And that's the angle. Now for more, let's go live to our West Coast newsroom where Fox's Bill Malugin is standing by. Bill, I know there was one particular case you highlighted close by here in Manassas, Virginia, which has seen a huge influx in illegals over just the past several years.
Yeah, Laura, that was an attempted abduction at the hands of an illegal immigrant I'm going to talk about in a second here. But look, the bottom line is we all remember back when Kate Steinle was killed by an illegal immigrant almost a decade ago. It was so high profile because it was so rare at the time back then. But now we're getting these headlines about egregious migrant crime seemingly every single day at this point, many of whom were just allowed into the country by the Biden administration. So look at this. So just last week, ICE's Boston office arrested a Haitian migrant who's now charged with sexually assaulting a 10-year-old boy. He first flew into the country last year as part of the Biden administration's mass parole program for Haitians. Then over the weekend, what you were just talking about, police in Manassas, Virginia, arrested this Peruvian illegal alien. He's accused of impersonating a police officer, then abducting a teenage girl as she was walking to a bus stop. Now, ICE confirms to Fox News the Biden administration caught and released this guy at the Arizona border last December. Then last week, police in Aurora, Colorado announced that 4 Venezuelan men they arrested in connection to a shooting are all known or suspected Tren de Aragua gang members. ICE later confirmed to us all 4 of these guys you're looking at right here, all previously caught and released at the border in Texas by the Biden administration. Also last week, a Salvadoran man was charged in a heinous case of child abuse in Virginia, where 2 little boys, ages 7 and 9, were found chained up. He had been previously deported, and he re-entered the country as a Godaway. Then ICE's Boston office again announced they arrested this Guatemalan illegal alien who entered the U.S. as a Godaway and is now charged with raping a Massachusetts resident. And ICE just announced that their Baltimore office alone has now arrested a record 153 illegal alien sex offenders just this fiscal year. Their latest arrest, this guy you're looking at right here, a 2-time previously deported Honduran national who was convicted of raping a Maryland resident, and he got back into the U.S. as a Godaway. And Laura, every story I just mentioned right here, every headline you just saw, that's just from the last week alone. We'll send it back to you.
The last week, well, Bill, I remember that story in Albany, New York, back in, I think it was June 26th, it was first reported that a undocumented immigrant had raped a 15-year-old girl. His name was Sakir Akan, arrested for having sex with a girl in the car during early morning hours of May 14th. He threatened her with a metal bar. The victims, the list of victims keeps piling up. And Americans can just, I mean, they can actually find this information out without your reporting. And a few, you know, our show, obviously, you're reporting, and a few other outlets. Most Americans, if they don't know a victim, they might not know this is happening. But I think it's beginning to grow. The news about this and the stories are beginning to be heard by more people. Do you agree?
Yeah, 100%, absolutely. I've been covering the border the last few years, and even I'm getting to the point where I'm shocked that these headlines are literally happening every single day at this point. The guy you just mentioned with the Albany, New York rape, that was a Turkish illegal immigrant who was caught and released at the border down in San Diego sector, an area where we've done 1 million live shots at this point, where we've seen men from the Middle East, from China, from Africa, from South America, all over the world just walking across the border, waving to our cameras, flashing us a thumbs up, knowing they're going to be released into the country. We had years of that, just mass catch and release of adult men from all around the globe at our southern border with little to no ability to vet them. And the chickens have come home to roost at this point, because now we're seeing the results of what can happen as a result, a consequence of that. These men all over the country committing crimes in different cities across the country. You got a Venezuelan prison gang now setting up footholds in different parts of the country. Every day we're seeing some poor woman who has been raped, some child who has been sexually assaulted. And every time we reach out to ICE for information on the suspects, a large majority of the time it's somebody who is caught and released at the border under the Biden administration. And it's just happening over and over and over.
And Bill, the Kamala Harris, I imagine tomorrow night will say something like, well, our numbers are down, And I think you've pointed out that if the numbers are down, it's only because they're coming through the ports of entry. They're not really counting the in-between areas. And also they're bringing in people under legal cover as well from 4 countries, correct?
Yeah, so what they did was after they had back-to-back years of the highest illegal crossings ever recorded, it became a big political headache for them, right? So they created these 2 programs. One is the Migrant Flights Parole Program, the controversial one, where they allow 30,000 migrants a month to fly into the U.S. from 4 different countries: Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela. Some of the guys that have flown in via that program have been arrested, one for a child sexual assault, another for an aggravated child rape, both Haitian men. And they're also doing this cell phone app, the CBP One. They allow people to schedule these appointments at ports of entry. They show up and they get released into the country. And we're talking like 70,000 to 80,000 people per month between these 2 programs that come into the U.S., quote unquote, lawfully, and they never get counted in the border numbers now. They're not illegal crossings, so they don't show up in Border Patrol numbers. So yeah, those numbers have fallen off a cliff, but if you look at the port of entry numbers, those numbers are skyrocketing because they're bringing tens of thousands of people in every single month via these lawful programs, and it's been effective at pushing those illegal crossings down.
I imagine President Trump will raise that point tomorrow night. Bill, thank you so much for all this information, for all your reporting over the years. And